All right. Greetings and welcome back once again. This is Amuna, and I pray everybody is doing well. Look, no, coming like me, I make up for all of the days where I never upload, right? So, greetings and welcome to those who have just joined us. This is going to be hopefully quick, right? Today, I've just been on Solonomics vibe, and I mean, speaking to certain things. We're definitely going to pick up back on Marcus, but there was a little conversation going on in the comment section. Artists, welcome to the discussion. And I have said this term a number of times throughout the Bob Marley conversation, throughout even Marcus Garvey conversation. Abini, welcome to the conversation. And this is the word trauma bond. For real, I was over here taking some downtime, doing some sewing. You know what I mean? But today I was having a conversation in the comment section. I believe it's Stephanie who in the last video I brought up trauma bonding once again, and there seems to be some misunderstanding around how I may be using the term. And so I wanted to come and kind of give some clarity. I was going to name this was Bob and Rita trauma bonded, but we kind of went into that. You understand what I'm saying? And this is all about education. Hold on, let me plug up my computer real quick. This is about education and hopefully us getting the baton like they did in the pen relays, you know what I mean? And continuing the journey for ourselves, right? I'm not giving you the fullness of everything. And my hope and prayer is that we continue to do our own research as we go forward. But this term trauma bond, much like narcissism, has been popularized. Actually, recently when we were doing Marcus, I forgot who said it, like he was a narcissist. And why, if you look back at the video, I made the face that I did, because when you start to come into these realms of, diagnosing people, and I know posthumously diagnosing people, you kind of have to have enough information to warrant this diagnosis, right? I mean, if we're going to be, you have to be licensed if you're doing it in present day. But if we're reflecting, you have to have enough. So I look back up at the older volume of the DSM-4. I just happen to have one laying around that I got out of my library of my mother, right? Now I believe they're on 5, but there's certain criteria, let's say for narcissists, and then we're going to go forward with trauma bonding. I know today everybody in every video is a narcissist, but it's not true. To be diagnosed as a narcissist, you have to have 5 out of 9 of the criteria that they listed, right, in their mental health manual. You understand what I'm saying? And so I say that to say that, yes, it is like pop psychology, one a narcissist, but, studying narcissism for quite some time, it has been said that there are some characteristics, some traits that even everyday people have, but that doesn't mean that they're narcissistic. You understand? That doesn't mean the person is a narcissist. It means that they have traits, and you need a certain amount of traits, and they need to be pervasive in order to say this person is a narcissist or that person is a narcissist. I kind of wanted to say that because I didn't say it the other day. Now, trauma bond. Yeah, I'm on a roll today. Because I was sewing, really. I was sewing these headscarves, and I was in my zone when I'm sewing, and I kind of had to switch back over a little bit. But yeah, definitely, we're going to get back to Marcus Garvey, right? So I wanted to show 2 articles, and then I wanted to show I'm not going to show a book. I'm going to read a little bit from a book that's called The Betrayal Bond. Like years ago, I had shared it on the channel, but it's worth sharing again. And that book is by Patrick J. Carnes, PhD Patrick J. Carnes, right? And basically what he's doing is taking the word trauma bond and he's rebranding it as betrayal bond. But before we do that, because there seems to be sometimes when we look up things or when we're using a word, right, or a terminology that was coined by other people, right, and we begin to use it in a certain way, then maybe there may be some misunderstanding around the word. So I'm going to use 2 articles, okay, 2 articles from the same source, but different doctors. So these are 2 Psychology Today articles, okay? If somebody was to say, what is a trauma bond? And they'd be like, I'm going to keep saying trauma bond. She said Bob and Rita wasn't in love. They were trauma bonded. Why she keep saying that, right? And I said this early on when I was reading their story. So let me go ahead and present really quickly. So hopefully I can clear up any misunderstanding that may be on my behalf. So this one is Ingrid Clayton, PhD, emotional sobriety, right? So she's a doctor, PhD, maybe in psychology, there along the lines. What is trauma bonding? A personal perspective, why you keep choosing unavailable or abusive partners, right? So this is what in psychology today, if somebody was to look up trauma bonding, she's going to look into, and the book also talks about it, why you keep repeating and picking the same types of people. So sometimes when I'm talking about trauma bonding, I'm referring to that. Something within this person is familiar and you keep picking that same person. I'm just going to go over the key points because I'm going to match key points for key points. So this was by a doctor. Trauma bonding lives in the nervous system. The brain makes association between love and abuse or neglect. Trauma bonding is an attachment created by repeated abuse, sprinkled with being saved every now and then. Trauma bonding in adults can stem from childhood trauma. Interesting. I'm just do key points for key points. I'm going to put her key points in here of what she described as trauma bonding, right? This is why. And then I'm going to come. I keep hearing, no, Garvey, today, Garvey, I come, man. I have some things I come. But trauma bonding, because all of this goes together, because Garvey himself, as we saw Judy Mowat's thing that I shared today, where she's talking about childhood, neglect to a certain degree and not feeling loved. The same thing could have be said about Garvey. The way he describes his father, one could say the same thing. So this is from the first doctor, right? And the first doctor describes trauma bonding. And the first doctor's name was, and this is why we have to go through this type of stuff, because why? When you start studying this stuff, it's like 50 million different variations and 50 million different philosophies. And so this is what Ingrid Clayton said about trauma bonding. Okay. Welcome to those who just joined us. Now I'm going to release my screen and then go over to Same Psychology Today. Same Psychology Today. And now we're going to go and look at trauma bond. And this article is named Understanding the Impact of Trauma Bonds in Our Lives. And we have another PhD, Annie, I don't even want to mess up Annie's name, Thanasorgaran. Okay. So Anna, another PhD in trauma, understanding PTSD, which is one of the places that you see trauma bonds pop up, right? This conversation, where these relationships start and why they're so tough to leave. Okay, where do these relationships start and why they're so tough to leave? And we're just going to do her key points. A trauma bond is an attachment formed between two people who unconsciously bond to each other based on shared trauma. So one space, it can be abused and abuser, right? In some contexts, when you hear the word trauma bond, people drawing that conclusion. In other places, it's people having shared traumas that they bond over. This is what PhD Annie Thanasorgaran is saying. Traumatic, and I've read it in both contexts. Traumatic bonds are typically established in abusive childhoods and are learned as a product of intermittent positive and negative reinforcement. Traumatic bonds in our intimate relationships are based on a compulsion to unconsciously repeat early unresolved trauma. So in another perspective, a trauma bond could be from the original source of trauma and that relationship to the original source of trauma, or it has been said that it can be where people are forming an attachment to one another based on shared trauma. So for instance, in the Bob and Rita story, when Bob is like his mama left him and Rita is like me too, and then he was like, he don't know his daddy, and Rita's like, her daddy gone too. And they have similar rejection from society for one reason or the other. They have shared trauma and they begin to bond over that. So these are the two ways that, and sometimes maybe it may be confusing because of it being used interchangeably, but it doesn't always show up in one way. So that second one was also from a doctor. Welcome to the conversation. And I just did I just touched on these points. And the reason I did that, because I was having a conversation in the comment section, where I believe it was with Stephanie. And I was like, hey, why not come live? And again, I'll open up the mic because this is a conversation. You understand? We learn and we grow, each one, teach one. So I wanted to share that because this was from two sources, two doctors, one describing it as being sharing something in a traumatic situation, people bonding over that. And in another way it's used, it is, greetings to those who've just joined us. In another way it's used, it can be in this relationship where these bonds are forged. Now, I'm going to read a little bit of from Betrayal Bond, and feel free to click the box if you would like to share. Okay. The betrayal bond, breaking free of exploitive relationships. Because why? For some reason, we have a reoccurring theme in the stories that we're reading about tragic or toxic relationships, right? And so to be able to identify them, one of the problems that historically some people have, we the people, some, is that it's normal, it has been normalized, but it is not healthy, right? So it's normalized dysfunction, okay? And some of the ways in which these betrayal bonds or these trauma bonds can be formed is through domestic violence, dysfunctional marriage, exploitation in the workplace. So it doesn't always have to be in a interpersonal romantic relationship, right? Religious abuse, so they can be like a Jim Jones situation, litigation, you know. I'm reading from the book. This is the introduction. Kidnapping, this is where we also see situations, hostage, like in the case of Stockholm syndrome, and how that term got popularized, right? In cults, which is also religious, emotional abuse, mental abuse, exploitation. And believe it or not, cults are still very much prevalent all around the world. In recent times, the Nature Boy cult, and they have him, I forgot what they got him on, but he was running one right in front of our faces and monetizing on social media, right? And I believe one of his wives came out, and actually the one he married on paper came out and had a conversation about how they were sucked into a cult, right? Addictions, incest, child abuse, abusive relationships are some of the ways that these betrayal bonds can be formed. Okay. So this particular one that is being spoken about is not the one that people are bonding over common traumas. This is the original trauma, right? The original trauma. So I'm going to read a little bit. I'm going to read a little bit, and I put, you met Nature Boy. What was your impression when you met him? He's very charismatic. I was watching it as the thing unfolded. It was curious to see how he engaged the audience, how he engaged the people who were there, how he, what it seemingly looked like, you know, was able to manipulate these younger, because they were younger adults, into following him into nature and just doing very curious things, right? I would also say that in the book by Dr. Carnes, he doesn't just single out trauma bonds. Trauma bonds are said to be of a cluster of other traumatic reactions. So I'm going to read a few of them. Reactions, arousal, blocking, splitting, abstinence, shame, repetition, and bonds. And all of he's charming, right? He's charismatic. Usually cult leaders are, right? Usually people who are able to get people to do things that are not nonsensical or outside of the realm of what somebody normally would do. Charisma is in the situation, right? And you kind of get the people to suspend their thought process. This is why I'm big on critical thinking, big on not suspending your own thought process, because it can be very dangerous. Understand? So basically, the book, you can definitely check it out. Let me see if I have a picture of what the book looks like. You can definitely check it out and go through it so that you can understand a different perspective of trauma bonding. But like I said before, there are different ways in which you can bond with people over different things, right? So this is what the book looks like. It's called The Betrayal Bond, and it goes into trauma bonding. I'm going to continue. And that's the book right there. That's just if you're interested in learning more about the emotional, psychological side of things. I'm not going off right now. They're like, Muna, another book. This is just a book I had to pull off the shelf just for clarity, right? Let me go to trauma bond. I want to go to trauma repetition and then trauma bond. And in the book, the author calls them the allies, those that I just named off. Those things, they come along with the trauma bond, right? The trauma bond doesn't, it's the entourage for the bond, okay? Now, reenactment, therapists use the term repetition compulsion, which means repeating behavior and or seeking situations or persons that recreate the traumatic experience. So when I say that the people have similar experiences, life experiences, and they bond over that, oftentimes now people get into role playing, which is this trauma repetition, where people remind you. Have you ever met somebody and say, this person remind me of such and such? Them remind me of my granny. Them remind me of my cousin. Them remind me of my brother. No, it could be good or bad. And sometimes they will now come into our lives and play the role of that individual, even though they're not them. And if we haven't healed from whatever, let's say in this case, it's trauma, if we have not healed from them, then that person now takes that place in that space. But that's trauma repetition, right? Which comes with trauma bonding. I'm not going to stay long. I'm just trying to bring some clarity to what I sometimes speak about when I'm talking about this situation. Let me just read this latter part here. Trauma repetition is characterized by doing something self-destructive over and over again, usually something that took place in childhood and started with trauma. So sometimes people go well into their adulthood repeating something that happened when they were 5, something that happened when they were 10 or 7, right? Or 2. So much so that you can't even consciously remember it, but it's still within your body. There's another, I'm not going to give one more book. There's another book that's called The Body Keeps the Score. And that one talks about how trauma is trapped into the body, right? So reliving a story from the past over. Thank you, Fever. Don't forget to click the like button. Reliving a story from the past over and over and over and again. Engaging in abusive relationships repeatedly. So sometimes women and men, but sometimes women will be like, oh no, it was Johnny. Johnny was the one that had the issue. He's wrong. And then you go to Steve and he'd be like, oh my goodness, Steve is just like Johnny. At first, he kind of reminded you of Johnny, and that's why you started talking to Steve. But now you realize that you were attracted to the similar things that is unhealed within you. Men do the same thing as well. Oh, it was the ex-wife, or it was the last girlfriend. She was the one who had the problem. And then you get somebody who's like her and worse. Okay. So this is trauma repetition. It says repeating painful experiences, including specific behaviors, scenes, persons, and feelings. And the thing about our feelings is that they do release chemicals. We do release hormones, right? Stress, cortisol, dopamine. We get addicted to these things. We become our own personal drug dealer. Okay. And that goes over in the book, The Body Keeps the Score by Dr. Joe Dispenza. And it talks about basically we creating these chemicals within us through our thought process. And so when we become addicted, let's say to feeling depressed from childhood or to stress, right? And so then you begin to seek out certain behaviors that's going to put us in a certain zone to release these hormones and these chemicals. And you need this hit. So some person who's used to feeling depressed and you try to cheer them up, they want to be depressed because to a certain degree, they may be addicted to the feeling of feeling depressed, and the feelings of oxytocin or the feelings of certain things that make you glad may be foreign to them. That goes in depth in that book. If you have time on the side, check that one out if you haven't checked it out already. So let me continue here. Let me go to trauma bonds. This is chapter 2, really, really quickly. Really, really quickly. It says clinicians call clinicians, he was describing something. It says Clinicians call it traumatic bonding, trauma bonding, traumatic bonding. This means that the victims have a certain dysfunctional attachment that occurs in the presence of danger, shame, or exploitation. So remember, we just read two clinicians. One is saying that you are trauma bonding over similar situations with people you just met. Another person is saying that you're in a dysfunctional relationship that may have the presence of danger, shame, or exploitation. Right? There often is seduction, deception, or betrayal. There's always some form of danger or risk. And then here are some signs that a trauma bond exists in your life. Because sometimes we can see it in someone else's, like, oh, snap, they got something going over there. And then another time we can't see it in our own lives. On page 29, it goes, here are some signs that trauma bonds exist. When you obsessed about people who have hurt you and they are long gone. And this is how, because you're obsessing over people who hurt you, but you never dealt with it, when you meet the new person who has similar experiences, y'all both bond over the people that hurt you, right? It says, obsess means to be preoccupied, fantasize about, wonder about, even though you do not want to. Like, I wonder whatever happened to that little boy there would pull me here in a second grade. You know what I mean? I don't know, but you upset, you know the person. It's a little bit deeper than pulling somebody's hair in second grade, but you obsess about it. You can't let it go. When you continue to seek contact with people whom you know will cause you further pain. Today we were talking about parental ill treatment during childhood, and I was asked when is a good time to either go no contact, which is a lot of information is on the internet, and I said it all depends. You understand what I'm saying? It all depends. There's no one size fits all. And this particular one, when you continue to seek contact with people whom you know will cause you further pain, that needs to be looked into further. But again, that's what is listed in the book to determine whether or not a trauma bond exists. When you go, quote unquote, overboard to help people who have been destructive to you. So you have a savior mentality. You want to somehow prove yourself to these people who already showed you that they do not care. So you go above and beyond to show up for people who would never show up for you. When you continue being a team player, when obviously things are becoming destructive. Okay? And that's also a trauma response where you're being gaslit. And that's another buzzword, gaslit, narcissism, all these things, buzzword, buzzword, buzzword. But when you are made to feel as though you need to show up once again for others, welcome to those who've just joined us, who have not shown up for you. We are going over some of the signs of trauma bonds because, like I read earlier in the conversation, the term is being used in different ways depending. When you continue attempts to get people who are clearly using you to like you. And me, I say so, you know. It says so. When you again and again trust people who have proved to be unreliable. When you want to be understood by those who clearly do not care. I'm sorry to hear that, Angela. Angela says she's going through the same with her siblings. And it happens in the family dynamic where you one day realize, like, wait a minute. And it depends on what side of the spectrum you wake up on. I'm not saying all the time, but oftentimes the person who is the victim wakes up and realizes, wait a minute, I don't like this behavior. But the person who is doing the behavior, welcome to those who've just joined us, the victimizer, they usually have reasons and excuses as to why it could never be them. And there's clearly something wrong with you, right? So this usually is for the person who's seeking to understand, why am I thus? Okay. When you want to be, okay, when you choose to stay in conflict with others, when it would cost you nothing to walk away. And that goes back to trying to prove to people, trying to clear up things that they clearly don't want cleared up because they clearly don't care. You understand me, I say? When you persist in trying to convince people that there is a problem and they are not willing to listen. And that goes across the board. This is the author, Dr. Carnes, enumerating signs that a trauma bond exists in your life. Okay, that you are trauma bonded, and it's not always a romantic relationship. As we're seeing, it's also a sibling relationship. Angela says, my older sister bullied me my whole childhood. She never took accountability for her actions. I'm sorry to hear that. But that is a description. That is an illustration of how, because you're in this family dynamic, oftentimes is expected to be a team player. It's expected to, that's your sibling, that's your family, right? So this is what creates this kind of uneven playing field, because even though the person is abusive, even though the person may have exploited you, even though the person have done all these things, it's still expected to keep it in the family, or to patch things up, or to be the bigger person, right? And this creates this type of toxic exchange and relationship in these first relationships. The first relationships we learn are the family dynamic. And this is why we have the traumatic repetition, which is going out and finding people, or manifesting these people, depending on who you are, into our lives over and over again, that remind us of such and such, such and such and such and such. Jenny says, when you are the black sheep in the family, absolutely, because the black sheep basically is breaking code. You understand? The black sheep is seeing that something is wrong and deciding, bruh, I'm not playing this game no more. You understand what I'm saying? And so in doing so, there's the other book here. It didn't start, which I think it didn't start with you, goes into that black sheep conversation. We could definitely go into it more, because a lot of truth seekers, what I found, are black sheep. Angela says, I'm from a Panamanian Chinese family, and I taught to respect my older siblings no matter what. Exactly. You have in the Caribbean as well, you have the older sibling. If they're old enough, you can't even call them by their first name. You got to call them sister such and such, or brother such and such. Because if they are a certain amount of years older than you are passing your place. And I see it even in other cultures as well, on the continent as well. You passing your place if you calling them out by their first name and they're like 10 years your senior. You got to call them brother or sister such and such. Lucy says, people who suffer trauma often go on to inflict the same pain and have the same behavior of the people who abuse them in some way, shape, or form. Yeah, they don't always do it consciously, and sometimes they can take two roles. They can either become the abuser if they at some point identified with the abuser, or they can allow themselves to get into the space where they now become the victim again. So they continue to get into spaces or attract people who are the abuser, and then they get re-victimized. So it's a toss-up. It can go both ways, or the person can just break the cycle and come back again as this healed version of themselves. It goes on to say, when you persist in trying to, when you are loyal to people who have betrayed you, again, like I said, this shows up in marriage. This shows up in, again, the workplace. It shows up in different capacities. It shows up in sibling relationship. It shows up in parent-child relationship. When you're attracted to untrustworthy people, and this is when now the initial trauma causes a trauma bond down the road, where the other doctor said an attachment formed between two people who unconsciously bond to each other based on shared trauma. And that was Dr. Annie Tanasorgaram. Okay, so that's when that particular one comes into play, right? When you keep damaging secrets about exploitation or abuse. So when you, let's say the Bible tells you open rebuke is better than secret love, right? Saying something out, keeping someone's secret that is abusive and exploitive, where now you feel bonded to them, you feel connected to them, you feel responsible for keeping this information so that you can kind of, quote, protect them. You understand? This creates unhealthy bonds. When you continue contact with an abuser who acknowledges no responsibility. So there, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. He named 14 signs that a trauma bond exists in your life, right? Angela said, I just learned at age 44 to set boundaries with my siblings, even though we've not spoken to each other in 6 Yes, and sometimes that happens. Sometimes it happens because it depends on how the family or the parental units deal with sibling rivalry, sibling squabbles, the interpersonal relationships. Is there favoritism in the home? Are there black sheeps in the home? All of that kind of plays into why and how boundaries weren't already set during childhood. You understand? As a parent, you're going to have children are going to go back and forth, but how the parent deals with that is going to determine, like you said, whether or not a child feels as though their boundaries were violated. And now, and as an adult, they have to set these boundaries. Oh, great. Congratulations. Angela says, I put myself through therapy in order to set boundaries. Even though I feel guilty and alone at times, I'm just thankful I have 3 children. Hallelujah. I'm thankful for you too. It is a lonely journey when you decide to break with the norm and you decide to go on your healing journey, because the reality is everybody that is not showing up at the same time, especially if people who are the abusers, who are the ones who were perpetrating the wrong. Everybody's not willing to come forward and say, you know what, yeah, I did you wrong, I apologize, because that takes humility, that takes grace, that takes love, right? And if you come from a toxic family system, it means weakness to some people to be able to acknowledge, like, hey, I remember when I was younger and I started going through this process way younger, and I was like going over in my mind, going through material, and you're like, yo, who did I do something wrong to? Who did I speak? Who could have I spoken better? Who could have possibly hurt? And I went back to those people just to have the conversation in the now. Like, I remember me doing these things. How did it affect you? If I hurt you, I apologize. Like, that is somebody who has a repentant heart, who may not have known better then, but they know better now, right? So you try to mitigate the situation and you try to fix the situation. You understand what I'm saying? Oh, wow. I come from a family of 14 children. Wow, you're the youngest. So I could definitely see how that is shaping up. Yeah, you had a lot of older siblings who were taking that role as the parent, that parental role. And if the parents don't kind of let the older siblings know that, okay, you're not the parent, then they, the older sibling could take it left, let's say, right? So I'm gonna read a little bit more about trauma bonds. How do trauma bonds become addictive? So some people be like, oh, they crazy in love. They singing like Beyonce. I'm looking so crazy right now. They doing the Beyonce, they crazy in love, right? And you think it's love, and it's a trauma bond. So the criteria for addiction are the following: compulsivity, loss of ability to choose freely whether to stop or to continue a behavior. Okay, that's not healthy. Crazy in love, bruh. Nah. Continuation of the behavior despite adverse consequence such as loss of health, job, marriage, or freedom. Bonnie and Clyde, nah. This whole Bonnie and Clyde wasn't healthy. It wasn't healthy. Obsession with the behavior. So this is Dr. Carnes from the Betrayal Bond talking about the addictive nature of trauma bonds. Okay. Let's continue. That was coming from page 31. Jenny says, Lucy says, I don't expect my siblings to apologize for certain behavior because they're so unconscious. They have no clue that certain things they told me affected me because they never had that intention. And that is also, as a mother, I would have to say that if the person didn't know what they did that harmed you, then the individual who felt offended or felt harmed needs to speak and say, listen, when you did this and this, it made me feel such and such. Because people are not mind readers. Just because you're in the same house or your family or you know the person doesn't mean you automatically know that that thing you just said offended them. So as we grow our emotional intelligence, it behooves us to be able to express to someone, say, Amash Makan, or, you stepped on my toe. When you said this and this and this. And even though we were young, like Lucy is saying, we were young, it still doesn't mean that it didn't have an effect, right? This is not so much trauma bond as so much as effective communication. That as an adult, like I said, for myself personally, I had to go back as a young adult and say, hey, how would I have felt if somebody did X, Y, and Z to me? And even if they didn't remember, or if it's in the recesses of their mind, at least I know within myself, I come back and say, hey, when I said this and this, it was my apologies. It was not my intention. How did that affect you? So this is all a part of the healing process. What I'm talking about is something that maybe you go back and somebody will be like, man, I didn't remember nothing about that. Or you might go back and be like, that always bothered me. You understand? We don't know what or if the person did it to you and the person starts like, why are you talking about that? Da, 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 da. You just know that that person is not open, receptive to the conversation. And that's all good as well. That's all good as well. Jenny says that situation usually gets worse over time. If those siblings don't care about you, they may even put your life in danger. Is a possibility. Yeah. Because just because you're siblings doesn't mean that they care. That's a fact. That is a fact. I'm going to read a little bit more about trauma bonds here. If you just joined the conversation, welcome. I'm going to put the 2 articles that I read over so that you can see how even in popular media, things, why is this thing so long? I don't want it to be that long. Even in popular media, these conversations show up differently depending on who's having the discussion. Why is this? I'll put it in the description underneath below. Lucy says, if I told them or even my mother, they would be filled with guilt and feel hurt for having hurt me. So I won't go there. Don't see the point. Well, if you don't see the point, then, that's just where you are on your journey. However, if someone had a similar situation, and I'm big on giving people back their luggage. When you go through the airport, everybody has their own luggage, right? Sometimes we internalize something that is not ours. If we feel open, or if we feel led, or if we feel inclined to speak to something, even though someone is going to feel hurt, on the other side of that hurt is either acceptance, apology, a point for them to grow. These things, we have experiences and opportunities for us to grow. Not only just saying I'm going to hurt somebody's feelings, because feelings, let me not go off. But yeah, I understand what you're saying. If you're not led to do so, I hear you and I understand. So it says, historically in traumatic medicine, these relationships have been called trauma bonds. But he says, I have called them betrayal bonds because in most circumstances, a fundamental betrayal took place. So this same Dr. Carnes, who a lot of people, you would say, coined it, although the term existed before, or popularized it, the term trauma bond. He's saying now he's going to rephrase it. He's going to microwave it, and he's going to call it betrayal bond because he's adding a little something to it. There are 5 realities about these bonds that are very important to know, he says. The first is that trauma bonds are seldom alone. This is the cluster I was speaking about, where it's not just by itself, okay? They draw upon the other solutions to trauma we described in chapter 1, and those solutions, again, trauma reaction, arousal, blocking, splitting, abstinence, shame, repetition, and lastly, he put bonds. I'm going to jump over here because I'm not going to read the whole thing. Trauma victims continue to recreate the trauma in some form for themselves or for others. Still, others recreate the trauma by identifying with the aggressor. That's what was just said, and that's what I reiterated, and perpetuating the same acts on others that were once exercised upon them. So some people recreate the trauma by becoming that toxic individual. Some who just set it up above, and then I reiterated it. Lucy said it, right? So you can, and I said, yes, you can become the person who recreates the trauma. You can become the person who attracts the person who's going to recreate the trauma, and you continue to be the victim, or you can break the cycle. All right. Let me go down a little bit here. The second reality is that trauma bonds and their allies can form a life pattern. This is something, that's why I say it's cyclical. Remember in the early videos, I kept saying it's cyclical, it's cyclical, it's cyclical. Life patterns that even go beyond our lives and extend to our family lives. Let me drink a little water here. Research shows that once you form a trauma bond, you are vulnerable to falling into similar relationships. So it's once you have the initial trauma bond with the person, you can leave that person, right? Somebody's like, oh, it was the ex and I divorced the person and da 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 da. But the initial trauma is still there. And you can go from that relationship and begin to bond with other people based on that same trauma. And you form a new trauma bond with a new person based on old trauma. The third reality is that trauma bonds can be very durable bonds. It can look like love. This is what I was speaking about when we was doing Bob and Rita. It could be like looking like it so crazy in love. It can look like, woo, Bonnie and Clyde, they're going to ride till the wheels fall off. Bad marriage for life, right? It can very well look like all of these things. And to the outside world, we say, them love each other, buddy. Is it love? Baby, don't hurt me no more. Okay. One of the phrases used by clinicians to describe traumatic bonding is the Stockholm Syndrome, which we've heard a lot of. In 1973, and it goes into the bank was being robbed. So this is one of the phrases. So far, this particular, and one thing in academia, boy, if you add a little puff on it, I'm gonna change the name so that, you know what I mean? It'd be like, ain't this the same thing from the other person? So they'll just keep changing the name. That's what it is. The fourth reality is that trauma bonds can happen to anyone. So it regardless of education, upbringing, religious disposition, it is not like, oh yeah, it's only this is the way in which you can bond traumatically to somebody. No. It also says there are two interesting characteristics to remember about trauma bonds. They can be formed instantly, but they can last forever. So like that, the person didn't even have an opportunity to abuse the individual yet. But spiritually, energetically, you become bonded to this person. Because sometimes when people are going to abuse somebody, they don't just bust out and abuse them in the beginning. Like, hey, they've come to abuse you. They come in certain ways. They come with their charisma. They come with their swag. As the young youth them say, they riz up the person. And then the abuse comes later. But according to the author, it can be formed instantly. Now, the question is, why is that? Why is that? But I'm going to keep reading. And the fifth reality, he says, are trauma bonds. They are not always bad, but they are about survival. So he's saying that the fifth reality is that people could have be traumatized because they went to war together. People could be traumatized because they were cellies in Attica. I know Attica is not even a thing anymore, but is Attica still a thing? No, Alcatraz. I don't know if this movie is telling you how. I don't know why when I was younger there was the movie Escape from Alcatraz. I don't know if y'all ever watched that movie. It was based on a true story. Crazy movie. So they could have been cellies in Alcatraz. You understand what I'm saying? And now they're bonded over that situation. So what he's saying is that the trauma itself, it could be bad, but their particular relationship to one another doesn't always have to manifest toxically. This is what the author is saying. And then he has a whole traumatic bond self-assessment, and the self-assessment is long. So again, if you think you may be having a trauma bond and you don't know where to start, look, page 37 through page 43, through page 45 is going to get you right. Because they're going to have some questions here, 144 of them, right? To kind of gauge whether or not, and I'm just going to read a few for the sake of time. And then again, let me see here. If you have anything to share, feel free to do so. This was just really quick. I came on here. This is a bonus for the day based on a conversation that came from the comment section. All right. Hopefully, this sheds some light and some more clarity that it's not really that cut and dry. Let me see here. My sister that is 13 child. She told me I should have. Whoa. Wow. Yeah, children could say some wild stuff. That's out of pocket. That's out of pocket. Like she had, Angela says, my sister that is a 13th child told her that should have never existed because she took her place when she was born. That's out of pocket. Again, that goes into the sibling. If the child felt dethroned, how close are you to the child in age? Because sometimes the toddler or baby, depends on how soon you came after her, may have been felt like, listen, they didn't finish being a baby. You know what I mean? And then they had to get, and usually in big families, things like this happen. And again, I can definitely see how that would be hurtful because, yeah, yeah, that's mothers have to be careful to not show favoritism because that brews hate and toxicity. That's absolute facts. That is fact, Jenny. Not only mothers, fathers, and grandparents. Yeah, this thing, children are very, not only are they intuitive, they're very observant. We think they bounce around and they may not have the language to fully express, but they are watching and internalizing things that we would not know. And so that favoritism thing, you can see even in a biblical story that I like to point out because you see the thread of favoritism go from generation to generation, and the fallout from it, the issues from it got incrementally worse. So in the case of Isaac, who is the son of Abraham and Sarah, there was favoritism in from Isaac as it related to Ishmael because Isaac was said to be the promised seed. So Isaac is the recipient, and I'm just using this as a case study illustration, and then I'm gonna come to the comment section. Isaac is the recipient of the favoritism, right? Because his son, his brother, his older brother is sent away, and he's the only one there, and he's the product of his parents' old age. When Isaac has children, Esau and Jacob, what does he do? He repeats the pattern according to the text of the prior generation, which is to do what? Show favoritism. So what does he do? He favors Esau over Jacob. Jacob is very aware that his mother is inclined towards him, but his father not so much. So much that his father, when he goes in pretending to be his brother to beguile his father to get a blessing, imagine him standing there knowing his father don't really rock with him like that. So when the story goes on, when he has children, what does he do? He shows favoritism to who? Joseph. So this is the third generation of those who are receiving favoritism and each time the family unit gets bigger and the issues expand. So when it was just Ishmael and Isaac, okay, one gets sent away, he's the only child. And it was two children. Now it's 12, right? Or 13 counting Dina, right? So now you have where it wasn't just one child seeing that you were partial in favor, have favorites. Now it's all of them seeing it. What is the result? Boom. He end up in a pit down into Egypt. And you can see this line. Some people will just skip over it and say, I don't see what you're talking about. But you can see how as time went on, the favoritism, it could have been justified or unjustified, but it will cause problems for generations to come. So that's one illustration I like to use because it is right there for everybody to see. And yeah, Angela, I'm so sorry to hear this. I'm glad that you were able to take and get therapy for this situation because it definitely does sound like there's a lot of deep hurt that is going on and being spewed, which should not be projected on anyone. And that's not, as we and making sense of this type of information, this type of rejection really coming from family. I do understand personally that it is definitely something difficult to navigate, right? But may you continue on your healing journey, because you are someone, right? Some people believe that trauma of slavery is imprinted in the DNA of the black race. It is imprinted upon, it's encoded upon the DNA, and it's called epigenetics. So the trauma is attached to our DNA, and it expresses itself um, when triggered. So this is why in the book that I just read, The Betrayal Bond, he talks about trauma. He talks about not just trauma bonding, but the allies of trauma bonding, which is trauma reaction, trauma arousal, trauma blocking. These things now, arousal may be like if you are in a similar situation, you may react in the ways that your ancestors react because of whatever markers are on your genetic coding, right? And we all do not necessarily react the same way for different situations. Welcome to those who have just joined us. I know it's late, y'all, and this is a bonus one. This is a bonus one because I wanted to go a little bit deeper and give the information on the books and the articles and why trauma bonding is not as linear as we would like it to believe it is. And it's really a broader umbrella term for different things that may show up in our relationships. Lucy says trauma bonds are an opportunity to heal the original trauma if people know how to do the inner work or shadow work. They're signs. All of these things are signs. So I agree that if we dissect, if we analyze, if we step back and take a look at, even especially if it happened more than one time, and ask the pertinent questions, how and why, because sometimes we would like to, if we are the victim of abuse, then we would like to stay in victim mentality, but one cannot heal from the victim mentality. One has to take personal responsibility and control over the narrative, not over what the abuser did, but control over the narrative in the now, because we cannot heal from a victim standpoint. Healing is proactive. um Leah, welcome to the conversation. Welcome, welcome, welcome. I'm just going through here. Yeah, I know it's late on this side. You're welcome, Angela. It's late on this side. I just wanted to kind of share that for those who have just joined us. Let me drop these two articles. I don't know why the tag on this article is so long. It is long. Hold on there. Let me see if this is the total article here. This is article number 1. Yeah, there it goes. And this is article number 2 from the same publication. 2 different doctors explaining trauma bonds differently. And then the third witness here is the book of the Betrayal Bond. If you want to really learn about your relationships and really get an understanding and assessment of whether or not it's love or whether or not you're traumatically bonded with this individual. Sometimes, like I said, I heard of a story recently. And after doing this work for some time, you could kind of tell, right? You listen to somebody and they'll start talking. Right? You'll listen to someone and they'll start talking. I just met this new person. Da, 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 da. And I listen and I listen and I listen. And then if you know a little bit about the family history, whether it be abusive mom, abusive dad, negligent, absent, whatever it may be, and they begin describing the person, I could hear it now. I'll be like, nah, 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 that's not going to work. Why? Because now our emotions, the person is familiar, the energy is familiar. I feel so connected to them, blah, 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 this, that, and the third, not realizing that you're going to manifest, you're going to repeat the cycle. Why? Because you have not healed from the initial injury. You understand? So, yeah, this is definitely what happens within our life. And let me read some of these comments. And yeah, it's just something to be mindful of. This is very deep and very informative. I will need to go back over this. I don't actually know much about epigenetics. Yeah, it's worth researching. And again, it kind of goes into knowing the storyline, knowing the family, knowing the experiences, so that you can understand that your experience and your family heritage and lineage is not the same as somebody else's. So to expect the same outcome or the same response or the same result is not necessarily what's the word I'm looking for here, conducive to your growth and healing. You understand what I'm saying? That's true, Jenny. That's true. Many people who are very accomplished use educational advancement to not think about the traumatic experiences until one day, you understand? You sit down and you begin to think and you have no more distractions. And then all of a sudden, it all comes tumbling down. That's why it's not good to stuff it in the closet. Okay, Jennifer is saying Marcus Garvey's playmate was who? Jennifer, you're gonna have to drop the the citations for us. You're gonna have to drop the citations for us. When it comes to our family history, yep. Now, do we understand the words? This is how it may not always. Okay, Stephanie's saying that do you understand the words? We must be born again. This is how we break the generational curse. Divine intervention, therapy helps, but not always, and it may take years. It will take years, not may. It does. Depending. I heard one person say one time, and I can't recall the name, that for the length of time you've carried the injury, that's how long the healing process is going to take. And I never forgot those words, because people will be like, oh, they have an injury, and oh yeah, I went through my healing 1 year and now I'm back. It's like an onion. You think you have gotten to the center until you get to the essence of it. LF is saying, I'm just realizing I've never been in love. I've only ever experienced trauma bond. Oh wow, LF. And shout out to LF. LF is one of day ones. Before I was even on this channel, LF was rocking and chiming in. So shout out to you, LF. But I'm also saddened to hear that. I'm saddened to hear that. But it is an opportunity to address why and how you continue to repeat this cycle, so that you know how to break it. I see someone in the chat. I'm almost going to wind down. I'm going to bring you to the stage now. Feel free to share your thoughts. Maji, welcome to the conversation.
Yes, peace and blessings, everybody. Hamona, you're doing a great job.
Thank you. Thank you.
I just wanted to say that there's a very important topic, and I just wanted to share that I'm a person. I'm like a healer, so I'm always attracting broken people.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know, I think in this life, in this world, we're all gonna be going through something and some trauma with somebody. But I'm 54 right now, and I'm like so antisocial, because is everybody got an agenda,
Mm-hmm.
and they want to do it off my back. And I'm gonna give you a quick example. My mother, for some reason, re- told me that I'm never gonna be shit. I'm never gonna be nobody, and that she's gonna block me, and to go find my mother because she found me in the hospital. And I'm like, who does that? And I said, what, and I'm like, all I said was, but didn't I take you to do your errands? And don't I'm always helping you out. And she was like, well, yeah, thank you for helping me out, but I'm going to block you. And I understand my mother had a harsh reality like Sadella Booker,
Mm-hmm.
and I have that consideration. But to make a long story short, it's been 2 weeks since she cut me off. And now, yesterday, she said, can I do her a favor by babysitting her grandchildren?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, you didn't apologize. You didn't say if I was
Right.
available. You didn't say. So I immediately told my sister, listen, I I have I have work to do, and I am not available.
Right.
Period. So I'm getting myself out of that trauma bond.
Right.
But
Right.
but at this point, I became antisocial because there's somebody next. There's always
Right.
somebody
Somebody
trying to
wants
try me.
something. Right. So
So thank you for listening.
now I'm listening, and what you did was set a boundary, right? To say, you know what, I would want to help you, but I'm not able to do so at this time, and be okay with that. You understand what I'm
Mhm.
saying? Because family will, they will test you in that way. Yeah. You know what I mean? So yeah, it's good to hear that you're sometimes you have to be, I don't want to say antisocial, sometimes you have to pull back so that you can
Yeah.
find your balance.
And you know what? I'm the one that said that I met Nature Boy.
Oh, okay, you did.
Yeah, because I had a YouTube channel, and I
Mm-hmm.
wanted my channel to go up, and he wanted to come to New York to get his passport.
Mm-hmm.
So we had a whole studio in New Jersey, and we welcomed him and his 10 members to stay in the studio while our camera was live streaming him 24 hours a day. So
Mm.
that was the connection, and it's a small world.
Right.
And when I first met him, he was very, very charming, like you said, very
Mm-hmm.
charismatic.
Mm-hmm.
And he was telling me that I should join the club. And I'm like, I'm too free spirit
Right.
to be a follower.
Right.
And after his wife met me, her name is Eliana. After
Right.
she met me, she got to see that I'm a real woman making real money, doing my own production, and I don't need to get smacked up by any man to get respect.
Right.
And after she met me, she broke up with him,
Okay.
and then
That's she's the one. She's the
they got
one
back
who did
together
the
again.
She's the one who did the tell all.
That's
Living.
Eliana, the baby
Right.
mother,
Right. Right.
the one that got married
That
by
story is
paper.
another story there, boy.
Hey, so
Yeah.
thank you so much. And remember, I'm always liking your channel, and I'm always sharing the channel because you doing something that is unique and separate from the rest.
Thank you.
Salute from New York City.
Blessings. Thank
Bless
you.
up. Peace.
Thank you so much for that. I have and that's what this is about. It has always been about. It will continue to be about. I think this is a key. If we One of the things going over, and then I'm gonna wind down Marcus, which we're gonna get back to tomorrow. Okay, so y'all stay tuned for more Marcus when Marcus meets Amy. But we're gonna get Marcus back to the island before he can meet Amy number one. But even reading the stories and going over this is to understand where the people are, where humanity is, and get us from, I think I said it in an early video, get us from what we need to do into the process of doing it. You know what I mean? Because we can need to do all day long, but we have to shift over into actually manifesting and doing, which is part of what we're doing now, having open dialogue, being honest, um, being willing to move through information that may make us feel uncomfortable. The healing process is, it can be a very ugly process. And another thing I wanted to say is that we use healing as like a very blanket term. To know what you need to heal from is to assess the trauma or to assess the wound. If somebody runs into an emergency, first thing they're going to ask is what happened. They want to know what type of wound they're going to treat. You understand? You can't treat one type of wound with another remedy. It's not going to work. So you have to assess the wound, and that is kind of what is going to cause the problem for people, because it's gonna hurt. Okay? You're not going to treat a burn the same way you're going to treat somebody who broke a leg. It's not the same thing. You're not going to treat a puncture the same way you're going to treat a concussion. So you have to assess what type of wounding it is. Where did it take place? Is it emotional, psychological, mental? What type of wound is it? Was it a physical wound? Was it a combination? What was the type of relationship? What was the dynamic? All of these things are stuff that no one else can do for you. You have to do for yourself. Talk the ting, talk the ting, talk the ting. When you let go, Lucy says, I'm going to read this and then I'm going to wind up. When you let go of toxic people, you make space in your life for good people to come. Providing, I would say providing you do not attract more toxic people. But you got to be patient when you're alone. That's true. You do have to be patient. I have a friend always talking about themselves, allowed little to no time for me to talk about myself. When I raised it, they said they would change. When I saw it continue, I shut it down. As I was not getting anything from the relationship, just them offloading. Right. Abina, that right feel yeah. So then that is also awareness, Like, wait a minute, this is a one-sided relationship. That means they're not really vested and care about what it is that you have to say, and rightfully so. You brought it up, which shows emotional intelligence. Like, hey, I want to talk to you about something X, Y, and Z, and it just may be within them who they are. But now they're made aware that, do they really care about what other people have to say? Jennifer says the story of Marcus Garvey, a documentary, is 2 hours long. Feel free to drop the link in the box if anyone wants to watch it. In the meantime, I watched a lot of the documentaries, and the reason why I'm going over this stuff, because some of the good, interesting parts, people just skip right on over. They hoverboard over it, like zoom. I'm like, wait, come back. Let's talk about this, because this is the making of such and such. AMSA says tools for introspection and addressing childhood trauma: journaling, meditation, prayer. Well, I won't get the other part there. These are some tools. The pouring of libation, I personally would caution. I know everybody has their different beliefs, because now we're getting into the spiritual aspect of it, and this can it can complicate situations. It can complicate situations. So I know definitely everyone has their perspective of how they move through. I would say that certain things will open up certain doors, which will cause more complication than what we, the people, would even be prepared to engage. So in this case, I would agree with Stephanie that one needs to be careful how they move forward with certain things. Our foreparents and our ancestors, their blood, their DNA is within our blood. If we move through this conversation, and this is just from study, observation, and seeing people go way off the path over the last couple of decades. I've seen people walk to one's the spiritual framework, correct? Because I've seen people walk right off the ledge spiritually. You understand? So there's a framework that one has to be mindful of, because it's not all what it seems. Let me just say that. And I wouldn't be who I am. I warned them in real time, and I wouldn't be who I am without putting a warning on. Again, people are going to do what people are going to do. But in this journey, it's one that it naturally unfolds. It naturally unfolds. Like I said, the genealogy information that I share on how to do it is, or if some people know their ancestry already and they don't even need to, they already know the information is already there. So you go back and ask about stories and occurrences and things of that nature, right? This is the revealed things. I'm of the understanding that the revealed things is onto man, and this hidden things is onto the creator, right? And there are certain things that we, in this form that we are, are not able to really comprehend. We think we are. We think we are. Yeah, but it'll take you woo. Yeah, I'm not saying that's everybody's experience. I'm just saying the people who I've seen, that has been a troubling experience. So yes, within the spiritual framework for you to get healing, again, agreed. Therapy, talk therapy especially, can only take you so far. It is a beginning though, to make you aware. Some total isolation doesn't always work either, because you don't know something is there until you get in that situation. Like, you think you got over your temper until you got in a situation that made you upset. It's like the monks saying, I have conquered myself, but you are not interfacing with society. How you know? You know what I'm saying? So I always find that sometimes I watch the monks and I'm like, wait a minute now. Yeah, you at peace now, but if you go and interface with the world, now you know whether or not you've conquered yourself, right? I agree. The creator will reveal things. I have to agree with that. The things that I've had revealed to me, I, they have been revealed in right time and order, right? You meditate and you ask for clarity, you go and get clarity. You understand? And you're gonna get it without any extra. You don't want no hanging ons, because some people, it may be your ancestors and it may not. I mean, it may be other stuff. You know what I mean? So we do have to be careful in that space. I would say that. So with that said, I'm gonna leave to put no, I'm gonna ask if anybody has anything to say. And if not, I'm gonna go ahead and wind down. You don't always need another to reflect. What is this now? Lucy says you don't always need another to reflect back to you. You've had trauma surface to your mind by doing breath work. There are tools. That I would ask that you explain that a little bit more. But again, Amsa says your spiritual framework, and that I would agree. You have to move within a framework. Now, I cannot tell the next one what to do. I'm just saying, just like I'm sharing here, and you can do your own research, I'm sharing, again, life experience at this particular time. I've seen it time and time again. So careful with them someday. Yeah. So, yeah. We have enough that we can work with in the now to move through the things that we need to move through. Back in the day on YouTube, there used to be way more stuff. YouTube switched up a couple of years ago, and a lot of the information that was here, a lot of the testimonies that was here, a lot of the stories, they're gone now. The channels are gone, everything. And so I think that did a great disservice, because now we have a whole new set of stuff that kind of flooded out all of that information, and I wouldn't know where to go looking for that stuff that was, it was beneficial at the time. Lucy says, in trauma bonds, we become aware of the trauma. By doing breath work, the unresolved trauma comes up to your mind. And also there's certain physical movements and exercise that also helps to release the trauma that's trapped in your body as well. So definitely, again, do your own research. I want to thank everybody for tuning in. Yeah, these are heavy conversations that I used to have a lot before, and now I sprinkle it in because it's not, it's heavy. Yeah, as I said, it is heavy. So bless up everybody who just joined us. I'm going to wind down now. I can't believe I dropped 3 videos in a one day. I'm going to rest up myself, and hopefully we'll be back to talk more about Mr. Marcus Messiah Garvey. All right, everybody, have a blessed night.